Hi guys, good morning. How you all doing today? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot. Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you all for joining me today. This is episode 131 of Hockey on the Spot, and I want to start off by sincerely apologizing for not being active for a while. I know at one point I had said that I was going to do a video on July 2nd, following the Free Agent Frenzy show. But then I really got busy doing some stuff, and I figured, you know what, instead of doing that and, discussing that entire day, I figured I'd wait till the end of the month of July and do an analysis on the entire month and some of the big free agent signings and trades that happened this entire offseason. So I'm really just going to basically be analyzing that, and obviously to just talk about every single signing and every single trade and every single available unrestricted free agent would take forever. It absolutely would, and I take long enough as it is. So for this episode, what I'm going to do is something I kind of did last year on what was only my second video ever. I'm going to analyze the top 5, what are, in my opinion, the top 5 trades and the top 5 free agent signings this offseason. However, what I'm also going to do in this video that I didn't do in my second episode ever was that I'm also going to talk about the top 5 available unrestricted free agents. Unrestricted only, not restricted. But for those of you guys who, of course, though, on a little bit of a side note here, who have not been following, looking pretty close that Montreal Canadiens defenseman PK Subban and the Montreal Canadiens could be going to arbitration, as he is asking for a lot of money for the upcoming season after his breakout year last year. And then the only other restricted free agent available that could go to arbitration that hasn't signed yet is Nick Spaulding, and Nick Spaulding who played last year for the Nashville Predators, but is now a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins via the James Neal trade, and we'll talk more about that later on in the video. But for now, I just wanted to bring those up real quick. And it also looks like, of course, this has been talked about over the offseason, is that former first-round pick of the Chicago Blackhawks, Kevin Hayes, will be going to unrestricted free agency on August 15th. He has opted not to sign his 3-year entry-level deal with the Blackhawks. He was the 24th overall pick in the 2010 draft, and he's just graduated college, and he's ready for the big time. Looking like the Boston Bruins, the Florida Panthers, and the New York Rangers could be the teams most likely to sign him. We'll see. It's going to be a very interesting race to see who signs this guy. Obviously, if we were doing the video, then he'd probably be number 1 or number 2 on the available unrestricted free agents, because this kid is going to be something special, I think, or at the very least a top 6 player. But we'll see. I mean, you can never tell with players who come out of college, and he obviously hasn't hit that point yet. So he's still a restricted free agent right now. So we'll see what happens in the future. But anyway, without further ado, let's jump right into it. The top 5 free trades, free agent signings, and available UFAs this offseason. And I'm also going to put an honorable mention or 2 in each of them. So let's get it started. And to start it off, we're going to first talk about, I've been thinking about it, we're going to start by talking about the top 5 trades that have happened this offseason. Trades are going to come first. So let's, and obviously no particular order, this is just my top 5 plus an honorable mention. And honestly, number 5 on my top 5 trade list would have to be, believe it or not, Josh Georges going to the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for a second-round pick in the 2016 NHL entry draft. That second-round pick is pretty much irrelevant at this point. It's not relevant until the day of the draft comes. Obviously, a second-round pick is a pretty high pick when you consider it, and that's a draft that's not until 2 years from now, so we'll see what happens. I feel like Montreal could have gotten more for a guy like Josh Georges. And what the Buffalo Sabres are getting in return for only a second-round pick 2 years away, considering that Josh Georges, the 29-year-old undrafted defenseman, has made a name for himself over the years as one of the top shutdown defensemen in the league. Originally a San Jose Sharks free agent signing, played there for about a year and a half until the Montreal Canadiens absolutely flat out robbed the San Jose Sharks of Josh Georges for Craig Rivet. And Rivet was a decent player for the Sharks for about a year and a half, but then he ultimately left San Jose and went to Buffalo. So Georges had become a staple on Montreal's blue line for years and has become a premier shutdown defenseman in the league. He's usually a plus player, and he gets down and blocks shots. He's physical. He's the ideal shutdown defenseman you need in this league. A left-handed shot. Like in all but 2 of his career years, he's been a plus player, and he's career-wise a plus 36. Last year he was a plus 6. Last year he played 66 games. He missed some time with an injury, and that is the one concern, though, with Josh Georges, is that he is injury-prone. But when he's healthy, he's very effective. Through 66 games last year, only 1 goal and only 13 assists for a combined 14 points, and in the playoffs through 17 games, just 2 assists. But you can't, with a guy like Josh Georges, you can't look at the points and the point statistics, because again, he's not an offensive defenseman, he's a shutdown defenseman. And when you look at shutdown defensemen, you got to look at plus minus. And this season, he was a plus 6, which isn't the best, but at least it's a plus. And in the playoffs, he was an even rating. So even with the playoffs included, a plus 6 overall for the year. So that's pretty darn good. And only 12 penalty minutes to boot. So, he's physical, but he doesn't go in the box a whole lot, which is a great thing to have. I think the Sabres, one could say they're taking themselves out of the Connor McDavid sweepstakes, as they made a lot of moves this year. I'm not going to, they signed Brian Giunta and Matt Molson's back there, and Andre Mazzaros, guys like that. They're pretty much taking themselves out of the Connor McDavid sweepstakes. Maybe the mindset for them is that they feel that they have a good enough team without Connor McDavid, and they want to start to win now. That's a possibility, but who knows? Who knows what the mindset is for Buffalo? But anyway, with that being said, that is my number 5 trade. Josh Georges going from the Montreal Canadiens to the Buffalo Sabres to solidify their blue line. Number 4 on my list for top trades this offseason, without a doubt, has to be Scott Hartnell going to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for R.J. Umberger and a 4th-round pick in 2015. 4th-round pick, obviously a mid-round draft pick, but is for the upcoming draft, so we'll see how that turns out. But let's just focus on the players going both ways. Starting with the Philadelphia Flyers. Scott Hartnell has been a fan favorite in Philly since the day he signed there. And last year, Scott Hartnell had an outstanding year. As we quickly take a look at his statistics from the last year, he had 20 goals and 52 points in 78 games in 2013-14, his 7th in Philadelphia, and he has scored at least 20 goals in 5 of those 7 seasons, including a career-best 37 in 2011-2012. Umberger, a former 6th overall pick by the Nashville Predators in 2000. And this is a guy, Scott Hartnell, who has been a physical force throughout the league and has developed a bad reputation as one of the more hated players in the league as well. After a tough lockout-shortened year for Hartnell, he had a major comeback year last year, and in the playoffs, he didn't do too much in the playoffs, only 3 assists, but an even rating in the playoffs and a plus 11 during the season. Obviously, the big concern, the penalty minutes. He had 103 penalty minutes, but that's the kind of player Scott Hartnell is, and 207 shots on goal, which is a lot of shots for a guy like him. But for Hartnell, he was an offensive and physical threat this past year. One of the better two-way players in the game. He's 32 years of age, so he's not getting any younger, but he still has a couple years left in his prime years. And so for the Columbus Blue Jackets, this is one of those trades saying they want to win now. But that's a big player for the Flyers to lose. We'll talk more about Hartnell in a second. Now we're just going to talk about R.J. Umberger real quick. This is a guy who was a former 16th overall pick by the Vancouver Canucks in 2001, native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is a player who, over the years spent in Columbus, really has developed into more of a leadership type role, and he really was one of the leaders out there in Columbus. And to bring that leadership back for Philadelphia, that shows that they want to go deeper in the playoffs. And I mean, that is the one advantage of Umberger over Hartnell, is that he is a better leader than Hartnell. He's more of a voice out there, and he's a faster player than Hartnell. Umberger, very well known for his speed and his wrist shot, and this is a player who, through his career in Columbus, has been an offensive threat. You know, this is a guy who is very much familiar with the Philadelphia Flyers system and how they play, because he began his career in Philadelphia. He played the first 3 years in Philadelphia, and all the way back in 2008 was arguably their top performer in their run to the Eastern Conference Finals. He had, through 17 games, 10 goals, 5 assists, 15 points. So he was one of their top performers in those playoffs, and what was a great run for the Flyers that year. You know, he didn't play a whole lot in this past year's playoffs, unfortunately. I'm pretty sure he got hurt in the playoffs or was just scratched. I don't know what happened to him. This past year, not his best season, obviously. He had played 74 games, and he had only 18 goals and 16 assists for a combined 34 points, and he was a -3, you know, with only 136 shots on goal. And through 4 games of playoff hockey that he did play, only 1 assist, a -2, and 3 shots on goal. He's not a dirty player like Hartnell, but he's not as consistent with the points despite that speed. But you talk about the past 4 years he spent, you know, prior to the lockout, the 4 years he spent with Columbus prior to that, all 20-goal seasons, 26 goals in 08-09, 23 goals in 29-10, 25 goals in 2010-2011, plus a career high 57 points that year, and then exactly 20 goals in 2011-12. And then, of course, a 20-goal season in his rookie year of 05-06 with the Philadelphia Flyers. 20 goals exactly. So R.J. Umberger, this is a guy who can put goals and put pucks in the net. He knows how to. And again, it's not like this is his first visit to Philly. He's been there before, and another 32-year-old has a couple years left in his prime, though one could say that maybe he's losing it now. Philly fans, he was actually even a fan favorite in Philly when he was there. Played 1 year with Scott Hartnell, so they know each other very well. And, you know, I think Umberger will be missed in Columbus. He was a fan favorite there for a long time, but now he returns to the place where he began his career. And what he'll provide for Philadelphia, again, is, you know, if he can get his game back in shape, he'll get, you know, 20 goals, maybe 40, 50 points. And he'll also get, you know, and he'll also provide great speed and leadership. You know, he's one of the faster skaters in the league. So very good for Philly to get that back and gain some speed to keep up with a team that's trying to go in more of a speed type direction. Umberger does fit that mold. So we'll see. It's going to be an interesting season for Umberger, and it's going to be an interesting season as R.J. Umberger returns for his second stint as a member of the Philadelphia Flyers. And now going the other way, Scott Hartnell, as I mentioned before, 20 goals exactly this past year, 52 points, but not very effective through 7 games in the playoffs against the New York Rangers. But for Hartnell, this is a guy, again, who has been in the league a while, and that's what Columbus needed. And if they're going to keep up in this league, they need to get a little more physical. And though they sacrifice some speed, they get a much more physical player, and probably a better all-around player, you know. As far as the leadership factor is concerned, Columbus has plenty of leaders that can take Umberger's spot in the locker room. They still don't have a captain yet, and they still don't have Ryan Johansson signed, I don't think. Or do they? I think they may have signed him, actually. I don't remember. Did they sign him? I think they did, actually, if I recall. I believe they signed him to like a 5-year deal, now that I think about it. But anyway, or they had something in place. I don't remember. But anyway, that's beside the point. Yeah, that's beside the point. The point is, that the Columbus Blue Jackets are getting themselves a very good player, and he'll be an effective performer for the Columbus Blue Jackets, assuming he can stay healthy. Obviously, he'll want to improve on his play in the playoffs, that's for sure. Whenever you have a bad postseason, that is something you always want to improve on. But we'll see. We'll see, though. It's going to be a very interesting year for It's going to be a very interesting year for Scott Hartnell and how he adapts in the lineup. He'll definitely be in the top 6. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt in my mind whatsoever that he will be back. That he will be back in that he will be back in the top 6. So. Yeah, so there you have it. That's my number 4 trade. Scott Hartnell going to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for R.J. Umberger and a 4th round pick in 2015. All right, now as we move on, my number 3 trade for the offseason this year. There's no question about this. James Neal going to the Nashville Predators in exchange for Patrick Hornquist and Nick Spaulding. So let's talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins real quick. This is a team that, to me, despite the fact that they've made the playoffs for so many years, this is a team that looks like they're in complete rebuild. They've lost so many players this offseason, including some key core players. In my opinion, they really haven't done too much to really replace those pieces. I think, to me, they've been more or less downgrading this season, which makes one think that they're not going to be the same threat that they've been the last couple of years. I think they'll still be a good team, and I think they'll still be a playoff team. And, whenever you have guys like Crosby and Malkin and Kunitz in your lineup, you got to think that they're still going to be a playoff team. But will they win the division is the big question. I would say at this point, they don't look like a division-winning team right now. Ultimately, I'll probably still make them the division winners for my prediction just because they were last year. But I won't be too confident about it. I think they're big. They lost a lot of key players this year that they need to replace. Well, these are probably 2 players, however, that could help out. Patrick Hornquist, formerly the last overall pick in the 2005 NHL entry draft, and he has not played like that. He has been one of the better goal scorers in the league for a couple years. When he's playing well, Patrick Hornquist is a guy who just cannot be stopped. This past season, was a major comeback year for him after a terrible lockout-shortened year for him. But he's played in the league for 6 seasons. 4 of those seasons have been 20-goal years. And this past year was his career year in points. For the 27-year-old Swede, last year he played 76 games and scored 22 goals, 31 assists, and 53 points with a +1 rating and 248 shots on goal. Which is a great feat for a guy like Patrick Hornqvist. This was with the Nashville Predators. This was with the Nashville Predators last year. And for Patrick Hornqvist, again, he's coming to a team that, in a minor rebuild stage, and Patrick Hornqvist is a guy who will fit into their top six, or maybe even to a lesser extent the third line if they need him to play there. Because in addition to being a sniper and an offensive player, this is also a guy who can play a bit of defense as well. He's an all-around type of player, and he plays hard as well. He works hard, and he's a player that could be very much admired as far as the playing style is concerned. I think he'll be an excellent addition playing alongside Evgeny Malkin. I think Malkin's going to turn Hornqvist into an even better player, and he's now pretty much entering his prime years. So Hornqvist, this will pretty much be the year to see what kind of player Hornqvist does develop into. He'll be an excellent addition for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he pretty much is the start of what could be a pretty good rebuild for the Pittsburgh Penguins if they are indeed going in that direction. Now, the other player going into Pittsburgh, Nick Spaulding, former second-round pick, 58th overall in 2007. And this is a guy who, has not been a prime-time scorer in the league, and one's got to think that may not be the case. He's 25 years old, and through 71 games this past year, only 13 goals and 19 assists for a combined 32 points, which is actually a career year for him as well as far as points. But he was a +2, and he only had 85 shots on goal. So you could tell maybe he hasn't turned out to be the offensive player that Nashville thought he was going to be at 25 years of age. But he's proven himself to be a valuable depth player and a very solid penalty killer, which is what Pittsburgh does need. Penalty killing, I do not believe, was a forte for them last year. And for a guy like Nick Spaulding, depth players are very valuable in this league, and that's what Nick Spaulding has developed into. Hey, maybe put him in the top six playing with a guy like Malkin. Who knows what could happen, Maybe he does become a good player, Maybe he does become that offensive player that everyone thought he was going to be. But the thing with Nick Spaulding is that, I said it before, he's one of the only two he, along with PK Subban, are one of the only two remaining restricted free agents that could go to arbitration. Nick Spaulding could very much go to arbitration. They haven't come to a deal yet. I don't think it's going to get that far, honestly. I think Spaulding will sign before it gets that far, but if he doesn't, and nothing can come out of it, then Pittsburgh just lost out. Pittsburgh loses out on one of the players they acquired for a talented offensive player like James Neal, and that'll be a huge blow for the Penguins. They need Nick Spaulding in their lineup. They need to sign him. I think he'll be a very valuable asset to their organization, and he'll be one of their better depth players for sure. Now, going the other way, James Neal, who, as far by the eyes of the fans, was kind of a fan favorite. By the eyes of the league, not so much. This is a player who throughout this past year, he only played 59 games. He missed a couple of games because he missed a bunch of games because of injury, but he also got suspended a bunch of different times. This is a guy who has become known for being one of the dirtier players in the National Hockey League, despite his offensive talent. Look at his offensive numbers through 59 games: 27 goals, 34 assists, 61 points, a +15 rating, and 238 shots on goal. Didn't do so well in the playoffs. 13 playoff games, only 2 goals and 2 assists for a combined 4 games. But he was a +2, and he did have 49 shots on goal. So, yeah, which tells you that maybe if he had played a full 82-game season, we're talking about another potential 40-goal year, maybe even exceeding his career high 40 goals, 41 assists, and 81 points through 80 games in 2011-2012. We're talking about maybe a better season than that. He's been one of the better offensive players in the league, and for a Nashville Predators team that's now going in a different direction and trying to finally become an offensive team, James Neal is a great start for them. They get themselves a sniper, a great sniper. At times could be a bit of a puck hog, but a guy who can really shoot the puck and get some goals. He'll be a valuable asset on their power play, and one's got to think he'll be their leading scorer for the coming year. At the very least, their leading goal scorer. Some people say that Neal won't be the same kind of player without Evgeny Malkin at center. That's a valid argument, but we'll see. This will be a big season for James Neal to prove himself and see if he's become an independent scorer or if he really thrived off of playing with Malkin and Crosby, particularly Malkin, since that was his natural center. But the risk with getting James Neal on the team is, of course, his attitude. His attitude. He only had 55 penalty minutes, which isn't the most in the league, but it's a decent amount. He had 55 penalty minutes. And again, this was a player who has been known throughout this whole year, did nothing but take stupid offensive zone penalties. This is a player who does that. He can be a very dirty player. He'll take unnecessary penalties after the whistle. This is a guy who has some anger issues. And the 26-year-old who will be 27 on September 3rd has to learn that he can't play that way. Or he's not going to play, Obviously, one game that really showed, how dirty of a player he could be was Game 6 against the New York Rangers, where he had 12 penalty minutes, This is a very dirty player, and that's one thing Nashville's going to have to be cautious about. They have to get it into Neal's head that if he's going to play that way, he's not going to play, So we'll see what happens. Hopefully this can turn out to be an excellent trade for both teams. I think Nashville gets the better of this trade right now, but we'll see. Anything could happen from between now and the start of and the end of the regular season. We'll see what happens. And again, the importance of getting Nick Spaulding signed will also factor into this trade as well. Now, number two, the number 2 and number 1 trades this offseason was pretty hard to determine, but after further examination, I've decided that the Ryan Kesler deal would be number 2 on this list. Yes, so number 2 on this list, Ryan Kesler and a 3rd-round pick in 2015 in going to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for Nick Bonino, Lucas Pisa, the first round 24th overall pick, and a 3rd-round pick from this past draft, which was ultimately traded to the New York Rangers for Derek Dorsett. So, after full analysis of this trade, on Vancouver's side of things, this is a team that missed the playoffs last year. After having a great start to last year, they really slipped their season away after that incident with the Calgary Flames. They fired John Tortorella. They fired Mike Gillis. So they have a whole new coaching staff and a whole new front office. Trevor Linden is now in the front office. Jim Benning is now the head coach. And for the Vancouver Canucks, this is a fresh new start for them. And Ryan Kesler, was not happy staying there. He wanted to leave, and the Vancouver Canucks really wanted to trade him. He wanted to meet his wishes, but he had a limited no-trade clause in which he got to choose the teams that he wanted to go to. Other front runners on this trade list to try and get Kesler were the Chicago Blackhawks and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And it looked like at one point the Blackhawks were going to be Kessler's destination. But when you look at the realistic standpoint, the Anaheim Ducks had been trying to get Ryan Kesler since the trade deadline. Kind of a good thing, though, that they did not get him at the deadline, because ultimately, ultimately the price for Ryan Kessler would have been higher at the deadline. The Ducks would have probably had to trade away some key prospects and key future pieces to their team for this upcoming season. So the trade that they made this offseason kind of worked out better for the Ducks. When you look at Vancouver, the draft picks that they got obviously were for this past year's draft. The third round pick that they got was ultimately the 89th overall pick, I believe. But they ultimately traded that draft pick away to the New York Rangers to acquire the enforcer Derek Dorsett, who will probably be a good addition for Vancouver. And the first round pick they got was the 24th overall pick, not the 10th overall pick. So Anaheim kept Ottawa's pick and traded away their own pick. And the player that Vancouver selected with the 24th overall pick was centerman Jared McCann, who will end up being a pretty solid player for the Vancouver Canucks in the future. He has the potential to be a second-line center, and hey, he may open eyes and become a top-line center. You never know. But Jared McCann is a playmaker, and he's a hard worker as well. So we'll see how that transition turns out. But then the players that are also going the other way, that are already in NHL regulars, Nick Bonino and Lucas Biza. Lucas Biza, of course, missed most of last year because of injuries, and even when he was healthy, he was scratched at a lot of points in the season. He really fell out of Anaheim's top six after being one of their top six defensemen for the last couple of years. One would think that if he was healthy and did not get hurt before the year, he probably would have been in the top six all year and would have had another fantastic season. This is a shutdown defenseman. He's a pure shutdown defenseman, very good at blocking shots, and a very physical player as well. And that's something that Vancouver needs on their blue line. But again, he only played 30 games last year, and through 30 games, only 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points, and an even rating, 43 penalty minutes and 30 shots on goal. So, but honestly, when he was in the lineup, he really didn't play well. He only played 2 games in the playoffs and only had 1 assist, and he was a -2 with 5 penalty minutes and 3 shots on goal. Although one of the playoff games he did play was Game 6 against the Dallas Stars, and he played very well in that game. He was one of the more noticeable players of that game. That was probably vintage Lucas Biza. That was his best game of the year. But for Lucas Biza, definitely a guy who's hoping for a brand new start. He's still very young as well, 24 years of age. Former 19th overall pick back in 2008 by the Philadelphia Flyers. For Vancouver, who's very thin on defense as it is, he'll be an asset. He'll be an excellent asset to their top six, and he'll provide, some physical play, excellent skating ability for a shutdown defenseman who's looking to become more offensive as well. He's got that big shot from the point, the Italian-born Swiss player. So we'll see what happens with Lucas Biza. Hopefully he can get his career back in shape in his brand new home in Vancouver. And the other player going the other way, Nick Bonino. This is a guy who, in my opinion, is probably not a player Anaheim should have traded. And that's my personal opinion. This guy was so clutch last year for the Anaheim Ducks. He'll be missed in Anaheim for sure. But, a lot of people have said that he had never, made it past, never made it up to that second line center role. Well, I have to disagree. He was playing on the fourth line all year, and yet he was one of Anaheim's top scorers last year through 77 games. 22 goals, 27 assists, and 49 points, a +14 rating, only 22 penalty minutes, and 159 shots on goal, all career highs. And in the playoffs, 13 games played, 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points, a +3 rating, 8 penalty minutes, and 22 shots on goal. Once again, all career highs in the postseason. So Nick Bonino, to me, was more valuable than what he should be given more credit than he's been given this offseason. And he's still 26 years of age, so he still has one more year to grow. So, my personal opinion is that he can make it to that second line center role. He'll definitely be given that shot in Vancouver, in my opinion. This guy is a pure playmaker, but he scores clutch. But he's clutch. He scores huge goals in huge situations. That's what he did all of last year in Anaheim. All his goals last year were clutch goals and came at clutch moments, including the Game 6 overtime series clincher against the Dallas Stars that sent Anaheim on to the second round to play the Los Angeles Kings. That was a big game, and that was a big goal. So for Nick Bonino, this is a player who's going to be sorely missed in Anaheim. And, quite honestly, he had more points than Ryan Kesler last year. He didn't have as many goals, but he had more points. But at the same time, one could also argue that Ryan Kesler is a more bona fide second-line center and much more experienced at it, which is why I think Anaheim may still have the advantage in this trade. You never know. For Nick Bonino, this could have been a one-year deal, that the kind of year he had last year, and maybe he doesn't thrive very well in a high-pressure market like Vancouver. So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting to see. And Nick Bonino's play this year is going to be key to how well Vancouver is going to do this year. Because in addition to his offensive abilities, he can also play defensively. Very good penalty killer. Very, very good penalty killer. And a guy who could win faceoffs as well. Now going the other way. The third-round pick Anaheim got is for this year's upcoming draft, and that's a mid-round pick, so we'll see how that turns out. But the key piece going the other way, Ryan Kesler. Again, this is a guy who many teams have been trying to go for a long, long time. Chicago, Pittsburgh. There are some other teams also interested in his services, but ultimately he and the Vancouver Canucks chose the Anaheim Ducks. They had the best deal in place, or at least the deal that most suited Vancouver's needs. And, for the Ducks, that was something they didn't have last year. A second-line center who could give them that extra push. And yes, Kesler did not have as many points as Nick Bonino last year, but he did have more goals. And, this is a very hard-working player who also can score clutch goals in clutch situations. 77 games last year, he had 25 goals, 18 assists, 43 points, but he was a minus 15, but with 81 penalty minutes and 239 shots on goal. So that minus 15 obviously is very concerning, but one could argue that he was playing on a bad team last year. So that was pretty much the reason, his worst season defensively. He's usually a much better defensive player than that. This is a guy who was a former runner-up for the Selke Trophy. But he's been injury-prone the last couple of years, and he's just now getting himself back into shape. He's 29 years of age. He'll be 30 in exactly a month. He'll be 30 in exactly 1 month, native of Livonia, Michigan, former 23rd overall pick by Vancouver in the great 2003 NHL entry draft, a right-handed shot, and he'll fill that second-line center role very nicely and and along with Ryan Getzlaf, could form one of the best, if not the best, 1-2 punches at center in the league. I think having Ryan Kesler on board is going to do amazing things for the Ducks. And, despite the loss of Nick Bonino, when it comes down to it, they still have a lot of depth left in the roster. They lost Matthew Perreault as well by choice. Obviously, he went to the Winnipeg Jets. But, again, they're still very deep this year. One could say that they may be even deeper than before. They got some, Andrew Cogliano, who could very well move back to center this year. Or, if a guy like Rickard Rakell proves himself in camp, he could be ready to take the third-line center role. And they also acquired Nate Thompson from the Tampa Bay Lightning to fill their fourth-line center need. So we'll see. I think the addition of Ryan Kesler is going to do some amazing things for the Ducks. And one could tell you that possibly if the Ducks had him last year, he would have given them that extra push that they needed to actually compete with the Los Angeles Kings. So that's we'll see. It's going to be very interesting this year. But that is the number 2 trade. I was debating that to be number 1, but when you really look at it, the player who was traded for the number 1 trade, is a bigger name in the National Hockey League and is an actual top-line center. So let's dive into it. The number 1 trade this offseason, in my opinion, and actually before we get into that, just a quick thing about Ryan Kesler is that he'll also be a big asset for the Ducks power play. That was just absolutely horrendous last year. So Kesler will absolutely help out their power play. So another big body as well. Great addition for the Ducks. I think Ryan Kesler is going to do some great things. He's already become a popular player in Anaheim. And the number 1 trade acquisition this offseason so far came on the 1st of July, just before the free agency started. The first big move to happen that day. Forward Jason Spezza and prospect forward Ludwig Karlsson going to the Dallas Stars in exchange for forward Alex Chiasson, prospect forward Nick Paul, prospect forward Alex Guptill, and a 2015 second-round pick. So that second-round pick will obviously be for this year. It's a high pick, but at the same time irrelevant until the draft. And then you look at what the Ottawa Senators are getting: Nick Paul and Alex Guptill, 2 prospects who, could be pretty good prospects for them in the future. Nicholas Paul, was a 4th-round pick from the 2013 draft, and in 2013-14 for the North Bay Battalion, 26 goals and 46 points in 67 games, 20 assists as well. So he could prove to be a solid depth player in the future. And for Alexander Guptill, he was Dallas' 3rd-round, 77th overall pick in 2010. He's 22 years of age, and has been playing for the University of Michigan Wolverines. And the past year, he has proven to be. And in 2012-13, he was a point-a-game player for the University of Michigan, or almost a point-a-game player. So he could prove to be a very good college prospect in the future for Ottawa. But then the key piece going that way, Alex Chiasson. Alex Chiasson's an interesting player. He's 23 years of age, former 38th overall pick in 2009 by the Stars, and he's a good player as well. Through 79, he had a pretty solid rookie year last year, 79 games, 13 goals, 22 assists, and 35 points, with 144 shots on goal and only 38 penalty minutes. And through 6 playoff games, only a goal and an assist. And it's only 2 penalty minutes and 14 shots on goal. But the real concerning factor is that he was a -21 during the regular season and a -7 during the playoffs. So that's concerning. The plus-minus is concerning, which tells you he's not really a defensive player. But offensively, he's very talented, got some great hands. He's got great hands, and he's only going to get better. Maybe he can refine his defensive game in playing with Ottawa. He's a right winger, so he'll fit in nicely on the top 6. He'll take Ales Hemsky's role, probably. And he's still young. He's like a young Ales Hemsky. That's pretty much what Alex Chiasson is. He's a young Ales Hemsky with those gifted hands. Some of the best I've seen in the league, for sure. So he's a very gifted athlete. For Alex Chiasson, I think this is going to prove to be a very good addition for the Ottawa Senators. Now, will he be able to replace a guy like Jason Spezza? Absolutely not, which is why we're going to talk about going the other way. But before we get into that real quick, another thing that very good about Chiasson is that he will help out on Ottawa's power play. Again, gifted hands, so you could expect he'll play out of the half wall or close to the front of the net. So we'll see. Jason's going to be a good player for them. And going the other way, prospect Ludwig Carlson, you know, I believe was a 2011 draft pick. He was a European skater, but in 2010, 2011, with Green Bay of the United States Hockey League, he played 56 games and had 13 goals and 38 points, 25 assists. So really don't know too much about Ludwig Carlson and what he's done over the last couple of years. Is that only that he'll be a solid prospect, I guess, for Dallas. But the main piece going the other way, Jason Spezza. Now, he's 31 years of age, so, he's not getting much younger, but he still is in his prime years, technically. Former second overall pick by Ottawa in 2001. Big player, 6'3", 220 pounds, a right-handed shot. And last year with Ottawa, he didn't have, he didn't have as good of a year as a couple years ago, but he was still solid offensively. 75 games played, 23 goals, 43 assists, 66 points. Only 46 penalty minutes and 223 shots on goal during the regular season. But the big concern was that he was a minus 26. So defensively, he had a lot of problems last year. And last year, he had problems with turning over the puck, which is very unusual for a guy like Jason Spezza because he's not normally known for that kind of thing. A big factor is that he only played 5 games during the lockout-shortened year and was a point-a-game player, and he played 3 playoff games. So he was hurt for most of that year, and so they were really missing him that year. But Jason Spezza, this is a guy who's been a top-line center for the many years now. But now, he goes to the Dallas Stars, and you got to think that with the Tyler Seguin just continuing to get better, and one's got to think he's going to have a similar type year. One's got to think that Jason Spezza's role is going to be demoted here in Dallas, which could actually be a problem. It's good for the here and the now, but the realistic factor is that Spezza only has 1 year left on his contract, and this is a guy who could find himself not liking where he's playing because of his diminished role and because of playing as a second-line center rather than on the top line. But you still think about that 1-2 punch at center. Tyler Seguin and Jason Spezza. Still a very deadly 1-2 punch. And with Ales Hemsky also coming to Dallas via free agent signing, the chemistry between those two was great in Ottawa. The chemistry there is going to continue. So, you look at Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn on one line, and then Jason Spezza and Ales Hemsky on another line. You look at Valeri Nichushkin, who's still developing into a fine young player. This team is filthy. They're going to be filthy going into the season. They're going to be one dirty team. And the Dallas Stars, they're back. The Dallas Stars are back. They're gonna be a contender for many years. Jim Nill has done a fine job developing them into the team that they want to be. Good job to the Dallas Stars. But Jason Spezza, again, he'll be a valuable asset to their power play as well. But again, the big concern, as I said earlier, was Spezza, not being happy with the role he's being given in Dallas. This is a guy who's been a top-line center, and I think, that might be a place where he may want to stay. So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting to see how things go with Jason Spezza in Dallas. But again, it's a 1-year deal. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting year. So that is my number 1 trade. Those are my top 5 trades for this offseason. Honorable mention trade. I do have an honorable mention trade. My honorable mention for my top trades, without a doubt, has to be Daniel Briere going to the Colorado Avalanche in exchange for P.A. Parento and a 5th-round pick in 2015. Which again is for the upcoming year, a low draft pick, irrelevant until the draft. But P.A. Parento going to Montreal. Pierre Alexander Parento, as he's called. He's 31 years of age, and so he's not a young player, but he had but This is a guy who's been known for putting up some decent offensive numbers. He had a very good year during the lockout-shortened year, but this past year, not so great. 55 games played, only 14 goals and 33 points, 19 assists. This isn't a goal scorer. He's not a guy who's going to get a lot of goals, but he is a playmaker. So, point-wise, he should be getting a lot of points and a lot of assists. But he was a +3 last year, which was good news. He only had 30 penalty minutes, and he had 110 shots on goal. And through 7 playoff games, he only had 3 points, only 1 goal, 2 assists. An even rating, only 2 penalty minutes, only 1 penalty taken, and 17 shots on goal. But one could argue that he actually played really well defensively in the playoffs, because this is a guy who could also play well defensively. But he's got some gifted hands, and a great first pass ability. That'll be an excellent addition for Montreal and what they're trying to build in their top 6. They have a lot of youngsters coming up, and P.A. Parenteau is going to help develop those youngsters very nicely. And going the other way, Danny Briere. Danny Briere, for a guy like Danny Briere, he did not have a good year last year in Montreal. He did not. He has another year on his contract. I believe only 1 year left, if I'm correct. But he's 36 years of age. He's not getting any younger. He is way past the prime years of his career. Last year for the Montreal Canadiens, 69 games played, 13 goals, 12 assists, 25 points, a +1 rating, 30 penalty minutes, and 118 shots on goal. So during the regular season, he did nothing. He was not a good player during the regular season. And he found himself a healthy scratch on a number of occasions. But in the playoffs, he did play pretty darn well. Maybe not so much offensively, but defensively. Danny Briere is a player who takes it up a whole nother notch in the playoffs. This is a pure playoff performer. That is why the Colorado Avalanche got this guy. He's a pure playoff performer. And, they're not necessarily asking him to replace Paul Stastny, though he will play center in Stastny's place more likely than not. But the Avalanche got a little bit older this year, and they wanted to go farther in the playoffs, and Briere's can give them that extra push to do so. Through the playoffs for Montreal last year, 16 playoff games, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points, and 20 shots on goal, and only 4 penalty minutes, but a -1 rating. So Briere played very well in the playoffs overall. So I think that'll be a great addition for the Colorado Avalanche. It's another veteran player, guy with some nifty hands. He'll play. He can help on the power play. He can help on the penalty kill. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see how Danny Briere is utilized on the Avalanche this year. And those are my top trades of this offseason. Now, I was going to do my top 5 free agent signings and top 5 available unrestricted free agents all in this one video. However, I do have work today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the video here, and I'll do another episode later on when I get back. It won't be part 2 of episode 131. It will be episode 132. So that'll be part 2. That'll be another episode completely. That's what I did last year as well. So we'll see. I'll be back later on. I'll be doing another video, and I'm going to upload this a little bit later. I don't have the time to really upload it right this instant. But those are the top trades. I'll upload this later. You guys can let me know what you think. And I'll see you guys a little bit later. But that'll do it for episode 131 of Hockey on the Spot. This has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. And I will see you guys later on today after work. Thank you and have a great day.